Hey, I'm Chris from Make Everything, and this is a tree swing that I made out of a live edge slab for my wedding. Check it out. All right, so I'm going to be starting off this project with a slab of beech. And this slab of beech is particularly important for this project because I actually got it from the property that this swing is going to be hanging at and the property that Angela and I are getting married. So we milled this with my Alaskan style mill and my chainsaw a couple of years ago. It's been sitting outside, and unfortunately the way that I had it stickered left some rot spots. You can sort of see them right near where I'm going to cut it. And the stickers I used got really wet, and they actually kind of soaked up water like a sponge, and then that water got transferred down into the grain of the wood, which is a little unfortunate because it left some softness, but I think I'm going to be able to plane through some of it and then harden the rest of it. So this is a 20-inch straight blade planer you've seen me use before, and it does a really quick job of handling this slab. The only problem is it fills the dust collector up almost immediately. And I've got a good cyclone, but it's got kind of a small bin, so these big chips just like right away clog the thing up, and it's a little bit irritating. But it is nice to be able to handle such a big slab. Now there are some cracks in the slab and splits from the way it dried, and before I get into any finishing or sanding or anything like that, I wanted to do some bow ties or butterflies. And I've done this process before using the CNC, and I really like the way they look. So this is a piece of solid mahogany, and I cut it in the proper orientation with the grain to give these sort of rounded bow ties some real good strength. And those are 3/4 inch thick. And then basically what I'm going to do here is glue down the slab using some painter's tape and some super glue to my spoil board. And then using the CNC, I'm going to inlay for those butterflies. Now, because they're rounded, I won't actually have to do any chisel work on these, and they're going to look really, really nice and contrasting with the mahogany versus the beech. Now, the way I set up the file for this was I had the corner of the bow tie right in the corner of the file. So instead of trying to lay all of these out across the slab, I basically just did one at a time and manually placed them using the CNC and zeroing it with the X and the Y. Now, this is a Tormach 24R CNC. The thing has been amazing. It's got so much power and so much precision that I can really easily do projects like this. And while I could have laid the whole thing out, I wanted to have a little bit more of optionality for laying out those bow ties and kind of just put them where I thought that they made most sense. I did larger ones and a couple of smaller ones, and in the end they looked really, really nice and had a great contrast on the finished piece. I was able to fine-tune the fit using Vectric, and then I used some Titebond 3 and hammered them in. And you know you've got a good fit on your bow ties when the glue kind of pushes them back out and there's that pressure from the liquid. So this really made me confident that these things were in there well and there weren't going to be any gaps once I was done sanding them. I had left them pretty long, and I only cut the pocket 1/2 inch deep, so I had to cut about 1/4 inch off, and I just used this little pull saw to get those flushed up as best I could with the top of the slab. And you can see the way they kind of hang over these two cracks, and these will just help keep this thing stable. You know, it is going to be living outside eventually, so I want to make sure that I stabilize it as best I can. And using this masking tape and glue, I'm able to just rip the slab up off the spoil board without doing any damage to it, which is really convenient. Now I'm going to go through and sand this up through the grits, which is just going to sort of help me get an idea of what it's going to look like and give me a smooth surface. But before I go crazy, I want to cut it to length, and I'm going to be using these Diablo fine finish blades, which you've seen in some other videos. They do a really nice job, even with cross-cutting, and they just leave such a nice fine finish, which is really nice. Now, once I had the ends cut, I was able to get back to sanding, and I sanded off some of that bark remnant. Before I go too crazy, there's one more CNC operation that I want to do. Now, because of the way that I'm going to hang this with a string on both sides, I wanted to be able to make sure that the string wasn't going to basically pull the slab apart. Now, if you think about a wood slab, if you put a pressure point on both sides of it and you pull up from those points while putting pressure in the middle, you can imagine that the slab's just going to want to crack. So I designed a rectangle in Vectric and then had the CNC cut it out which is going to essentially inlay a spreader bar made out of mahogany, which is just going to help more evenly distribute the weight on this. Now, you obviously do not need to use a CNC to do something like this. You could have easily done this with a router, but since I have the CNC, I figured why not use it. So these are just 3/4 inch thick pieces of mahogany left over from another project, and by just having them sit in the bottom there, it's going to more evenly distribute the weight, which is going to really help keep this thing strong and keep it from breaking if you put 2 people on it. Now, once I had an idea of where they were going to line up in the bottom, I drilled holes through the top in the appropriate locations, not really thinking too much about how they were going to lay out underneath, because it's really just important that the swing look correct from above, and then the underside will sort of work itself out. So once I drilled the holes through the slab, I transferred through those holes straight into the mahogany while it just sat on the bench, and that made me able to kind of get a good location, and then I can just plow through them with the drill press, which will, make quick work of this mahogany. Drilling with a Forstner bit freehand can be a little laborious, so using a drill press is always kind of the choice. Now, just to give myself a nicer finish here, I put a little roundover bit in my Milwaukee cordless router, and I buzzed around those corners, giving me just like a nice subtle eased edge, and I did it on the bottom as well, just to make sure that there weren't any sharp edges or any sort of pinch points that would cause more sort of tension on any of the pieces of material. A little bit of sanding kind of cleans up those holes, and then I can really kind of push through the grits and sand this thing down to its final finish before I go ahead and start applying my wood hardener. I believe I went up to like 220. So now over on my bench, I've got this wood hardening product from Totalboat. Now this is a deep set epoxy, a slow setting, penetrating epoxy. And the point of this is to harden those fibers in this soft and kind of spongy slab so that water doesn't penetrate into them and cause any rot or any damage. Now this stuff goes on like water, and you can apply as much of it as the wood will take. So I applied it on the bottom first, flipped it over, and then applied it on the top and applied it on the stretcher bars, especially on the end grain, as best as I could. And I really just kept applying it until I felt that the wood was done taking it. And you can see from the reflection in it, certain areas of the wood absorbed it much faster and much more than other areas. Like that heartwood in the center is harder, so it didn't absorb as much as the softer wood off to the sides. And this is okay because I'm also going to be coating this thing in some varnish, so it's not a big deal for there to be sort of differences in the absorption of this slow and penetrating epoxy. You can sort of see it in this shot that there's certain areas of the slab that are shiny and some of which are matte, and that's the difference between what really, really soaked in multiple coats and what sort of stopped with just one coat and hardened on the surface. There were some drips on the bottom, so I went through with some kind of higher grit sandpaper, heavier grit sandpaper, and sanded those off. Now you can see the way the spreader bars are going to sit in there, and everything's going to look really nice. Now before I go ahead and give it the varnish finish, I wanted to sand off any of those high spots from the penetrating epoxy and really get the thing down to a uniform 220 grit sanded finish, which you can see looks pretty dull. Now this is an outdoor swing, which is going to be outside for a lot of its life. So I wanted to really make sure I got a great finish on it. So after I was done, I blew it off with the compressed air, and then I'm going to use the Halcyon Clear varnish from Totalboat. And what I really like about this is that it's in this bag, which makes it super easy to mix and really, really easy to apply and then store. When you use a can of varnish or polyurethane, by opening and closing it and like dripping your paintbrush on the edge, I always feel like the edges get really crusty and I wind up kind of killing the product by letting the top of it skim over. In a bag like this, I've never used a product that came in like a bladder, but it works so much better for using this product over and over again in different applications and not destroying it by kind of, an air leak or anything else that would cause it to skin over or just sort of become not perfect, which would then cause imperfections in my projects. So I put 4 coats on this and I gave it ample time to dry between coats, but you really can recoat, I think, in 30 minutes with this. It's really, really fast and really cool, and it is a marine grade varnish, so just for normal outside use, I think it's going to hold up really, really well, and the finish just looks nice. So I'm applying it with a nice wide foam brush, trying to make sure that I don't have too many heavy brush strokes. And every time I apply a new coat, I'm sanding in between, which is just making it look totally beautiful. Now I'm going to spare you the other 3 sessions of finishing and skip over to where Angela wood burned our names into the bottom of this swing. Now we built this for our wedding to hang at the wedding venue and just sort of be something that her and I worked on together that people could take photos near and we could kind of remember the wedding by, and eventually bring this back to our home and always sort of have that as a memory. So Angela's been doing a lot of wood burning, and she had no problem just writing our names and the date in the bottom of this beech, but wanted to make sure it was nice and deep, which took a couple of kind of passes with her wood burner. Now that that's all done, I'm able to start dealing with the rope and the knots. And this is a 1-inch poly rope that I got on Amazon. It's nice and thick, and it's going to really just kind of look good with the swing, along with obviously being really, really strong. The way I wanted to knot this was so that I could have a knot on either side on the bottom, just like a single knot that would cinch up when you put weight on it, and then a knot in the center to sort of hold the rope so that you had a straight run of rope heading up towards the tree. So I'm trying to tie the knots and sort of stand on it as I put tension on it, which is tightening up those knots as I go. Now, before I head over to the venue, I did a little test hang on my beam out in the driveway of the shop just to make sure it would hang evenly and see how it looked. Now, this is actually the day before our wedding over at the venue where I'm setting this up. And the tree that I'm hanging on is another beech tree, like a sibling of the slab that this bench is being made from, which I thought was pretty cool. And our wedding is going to take place right behind this scene on that terrace, which I thought was a really nice way for us to sort of, be connected with it, and have our friends and families use something that we made. So I'm hanging it using like a tree swing hanging kit from Amazon, which worked out really well. And it's a little uneven because of the pitch of that branch, but otherwise it worked out really, really nice and looked beautiful. With that finish on there, the butterflies look so nice on a beautiful sunny day, and our florist put some vines up the string, which looked really, really great, and you can see that wood burning in the bottom really kicked it off. Our wedding guests loved it, and I am so happy with how it came out. All right, that about does it for this video. Funny enough, this slab actually came from the property that Angela and I got married on. A couple of years ago, a tree had fallen in a hurricane, and my friend Macklin picked up a log. We milled it. It sat outside my yard for years, and then I turned it into this swing. So I think it came out really nice. I really like the bow ties I was able to do with the CNC, and the finish came out awesome. I used that Totalboat penetrating epoxy, and then the Totalboat Halcyon clear varnish. Everything looks really nice, and I think it's going to hold up for a really long time. What do you think?
Great.
You like it?
Yes.
All right. That's all that matters. Thanks, guys, for watching. Again, I'm Chris Zeff from Make Everything. Check me out here on Instagram. And also, go ahead and check out all the people that helped me and Angela make our wedding perfect. Vanessa, Rich, and the team at Mill Creek, and our friends at Petals Floral. All the local vendors that we used were amazing. I'm going to put links to all them down in the description. If you're in Long Island or in New York City, anywhere around here, you really should reach out to these people because they made our event amazing through a ton of different obstacles and a lot of planning. So thank you so much to them. Check them out and follow them all down below. I hope you enjoyed this. Subscribe for more, and we'll see you on the next one.